to another episode of the Roundtable here at mycountylink.com as we continue to take a look at hopefully interesting topics involving people, places, and events here in West Central Ohio. Alex Warner, this is April Fool's Day, and I think we've got all the fools here. We've got Mike Stiegel on my left, Galen Blosser on my right, and the only person to bring sanity to the whole thing is Greenville High School Athletic Director Aaron Shaffer. And Aaron, thanks for taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule. And guys, we've the last 3 episodes we've talked about retirement communities and aging. We've talked about bird flu or avian flu, and we've talked about issue 2 and the marijuana. Now we're getting a little bit back into our wheelhouse here and talk a little bit of sports here with Aaron Shaffer. And tell you what, Aaron, you've had an interesting month or 2 here recently, haven't you? A lot of things going on.
Yeah, it's definitely a busy time any year when you're transitioning out of winter to spring. But then you throw on top of that, we finished up a football search, which was a little atypical in how it played out. But we're happy to have found Coach Chanel and are moving forward there. We're still trying to find a girls soccer coach and now a girls basketball coach. So we've been busy, but that's part of the game. We're trying to find good coaches for our kids and provide great opportunities for our kids and coaches to be successful on the field.
Yeah, well, and you throw on top of it, there's been some changes in the scenery out in the park, haven't there?
Well, yeah, I mean,
football field.
That goes without saying. It feels like we've been doing something stadium construction wise for what feels like forever. We finished up, 3 years ago we did the field house, and then last year we dealt with tornado and the tornado damages and repairs, and now we're full speed ahead on replacing the old stadium. So we're excited about that, but the timeline is going to be tight, and we need Mother Nature to cooperate so that we're in there August 1. But definitely exciting times.
Yeah, I haven't been out this week. Have you been by? I know the east side, the visitor side's down. Have they taken the west side down? I haven't been out for a couple days.
They're starting on it.
Yeah, not yet. They're finishing up some of the demo on the east side or the visitor side, and then they'll be moving right over to home side. Yeah. Should be sometime later this week, provided weather cooperates, and it'll be it'll be quick at the beginning with seeing it go down, and then it'll feel a little slower here for a month or 2 as we start getting some of the prep work and foundation work together until we get more into the summer months when it'll be time to start seeing things happen in terms of going back up.
Speaking of weather, this time of year is always tough when especially with this kind of weather. How are we doing schedule wise? Are you? I know you got stuff to make up, but how far behind are you at this point?
Well, being as early as we are, we've been pretty fortunate that we've been able to keep most of our games on schedule or on time. We had to get a little creative this week. The weather here over the next 4 or 5 days doesn't look great. I mean, there's flood warnings or flood watches out there and whatnot. We moved some softball games around to play double headers today and a baseball game a day forward. So we're not in too bad a shape right now, but you ask me this question a week from now, I'd probably feel a little different.
I imagine.
Hey, let's get back to the stadium real quickly. For those people out there that aren't aware, what's going to be the seating capacity and the configuration, and how's that all going to fit?
As far as the configuration goes, you're going to see a steel and aluminum structure. That's what modern high school bleachers look like now. You're going to have about 2,400, 2,250 on the home side, kind of high rise, be 23 rows, be a lot taller. Then you get about 1,100 or 1,200 on the visitor side. Your capacity is going to be right around 3,500. Okay. There may, we have to decide on some other potential bleachers and things like that in the south end zone for bands and things like that. But you're going to see the capacity is going to be actually a little bigger than the old stadium, but sight lines and your visibility is going to be much better.
Mm-hmm. How about the press box facility then?
Much larger than the old press box. If I recall correctly, there'll be 19 total operational seats. There'll be separated coaches boxes where there'll be 4 seats inside each of those coaches boxes. There'll be 2 media boxes. They're not really going to be boxes, but they'll be divided from the game operations with some dividers. There'll be 2 areas for those, and then I think it's 11 seats for game operations.
With the new stadium, will you be able to go back to getting some of the playoff games and does that help us? And one thing I would like to say here is a lot of people don't realize this. Versailles, when they go to state and have been playing and going deep in the playoffs, they come to our stadium and use our stadium to practice. And I know Coach has been over there, I think on even Thanksgiving Day, to open the stadium, turn the lights on if you need. So you've really been helpful and kind to Versailles to allow them to come practice on a turf field.
Yeah, so to answer the first part of your question is absolutely that we'll be back into the mix with the playoff games. You know, we had hosted a few the 2 previous years to the Tornado, where we had Ansonia and New Bremen here for a regional semifinal, and then we had Hamilton, Baden, and Wapak here back in 23, and those were great games. You know, honestly, that Hamilton Baden Wapak game was a Division III game that I did not expect to get when we put in to host. Even last year with some of the tornado damage and our inability to host because our press box wasn't in great shape, our capacity had been limited due to some of the structural issues. Even then, the OHSAA called me 3 times to make sure that we couldn't. Where we're at locationally makes it nice for some of those West Central teams. You know, when you have teams like those MAC schools, you know, your Marion Locals and your St. Henry's, Coldwater, Versailles, those schools generally end up playing schools down near Cincinnati, and they do try to find equidistant travel to stadiums. And once we have our new stadium and new press box up, we're going to have a facility that can manage, you know, a playoff game very well. And it does benefit us. You know, the concession money we get to keep, we get a rental fee from the state, we can charge for parking, so it does supplement our budget. So, you know, there's some, you know, we have to decide how much we want to do at some point. Soccer matches, they're starting to ask for us to do soccer matches, which again, it's not a hard thing to do, but it is an opportunity to make a little bit more money for our athletic department, which supports our kids. As far as helping the other schools, you know, we've had Ansonia in, we've had Versailles in, Tri-Village has visited us to practice, and that's just about being a good neighbor, a good friend, you know, to our neighboring communities. You know, we would like to have those opportunities if we needed to. You know, like if we're playing in a game where we need to stop and practice, say our softball team's playing in Akron or something like that, we may try to call somebody on their travel on the way up to get on a field or get out and stretch our legs and move around. So those are things you do to help, you know, schools that are competing. And really what they're trying to do is get on turf. You know, after the first 2 rounds, the playoff games are played on turf, and with us having turf field and being the only turf field in the county, it makes it easier for them to travel here.
I know we've got, with the new stadium, we're going to have really top flight facilities. The new locker rooms, concession area is one of the best I've ever seen. What about a wrestling room and a weight room?
So, you know, there was an exploratory group that started meeting back last year, actually around this time, where we were starting to look at how and where and what we needed. Obviously, our wrestling program had tremendous success this year. Coach Giosi and the guys are doing a great job, you know, with the number of kids we sent to districts, and Andrew Winter, you know, finishing 5th in the state at the heavyweight division. They're doing a great job, and with their facilities, it's tough. You know, they practice in the auxiliary gym in the back, which also houses our weight room. So you're kind of stepping on one another when you're trying to train and practice. So that would be something we will, you know, one project at a time right now, Mike. But that's something that definitely needs to be addressed in terms of how do we help our kids become more well-trained and better prepared. That's an expensive proposition. You know, anytime you get into weight room facilities and things like that, it becomes very expensive. I'm sure at some point we'll start talking to our local community again to help, to get some help financially. But it's definitely a need, and I think that's something that we'll be looking at once we have the stadium completed.
And that facility that you're talking about will be where that present, well, it used to be the park maintenance building at the northwest corner, correct?
I mean, that's a place where we could look. One of the things that we do have to be aware of, you know, our maintenance folks do have to have place for their equipment and their machines and all the things that they need to keep our district running smoothly. There could be some other places potentially that it could land, but in terms of athletically, I mean, that building is right in the middle of our outdoor facilities,
Yep.
between our stadium, our track, our tennis courts. It's probably not the most ideal location for a wrestling facility, but it would be something I think that we would talk about, and obviously the school board and superintendent would obviously have a decision to make there with that.
I honestly don't think people in Greenville realize just how good of facilities we have here. We've got one of the best softball facilities in the state, there's no question. Our baseball facility down there on Saturn, that's wonderful. That's a great facility. Look at our tennis courts. Our football field now is going to be all fixed up. If we can do the wrestling, in the weight room, will there be any better facilities in Southwest Ohio than what we've got?
I don't think so. We're very fortunate here to have the support of GGSA and GCBL. Obviously our baseball and softball facilities are off-site in community parks. The groups there have done a great job of building their facilities up and allowing us to be partners with them. But then, you look at the things that we've done over the last decade or so outside with the turf and the track, and then we get the field house and now the
Right.
stadium. Our outdoor facilities are second to none. Schools our size generally don't have facilities
That's
like
correct.
this.
I can vouch for that.
The things that we've got to be able to do is we've got to be able to maintain those and find ways to continue to make it better. Obviously our gym is our gym, but we try to make sure that we keep that the way it is. But I do agree, we have some of the best facilities around, and it's hard to dispute that. The opponents who come here are always very complimentary of our facilities and the way they're treated when they're here. So we are very fortunate in that regard.
Have you ever looked at moving the tennis courts over to the little baseball or softball field there in front of the school and putting the tennis courts into parking? Because people park up and down the streets. Would that ever be a possibility down the road?
I don't know. That's come up a couple of times in conversation with people in the community. I think that probably, if that was ever going to happen, that may have been something that would have happened back when I first got back here in 2012, 2013, when they first were resurfaced. Ideally, that would be great. Obviously, it would clean up some parking issues, but I just don't think that's something that we're going to be into right now.
Okay. Well, we've kind of covered facilities and so forth. Let's talk a little bit. So, one thing that's been going on over the last month or so then is who's going to head up the football program. Let's talk a little bit about Coach T. Chanel here and a little bit of his background and what he envisions here. So
Coach Chanel is a veteran coach. He really made a name for himself in the 90s up through like 2010. Was the head coach at Edgewood High School. Very successful down there, multiple playoff runs, multiple league championships. Left there and went to Miamisburg, turned the program around that had been struggling again. Made a couple of playoff pushes, won a lot of games. He league championships down there. Left Miamisburg, took some time off, and then jumped back into it the last few years. He's been over at Troy as their offensive coordinator. Coach Chanel is a very organized, well thought out, disciplined coach. I would expect that you'll see us run the ball quite a bit in his philosophy. His philosophy is to control the ball both offensively and defensively, shorten the game, and give yourself a chance to win at the end of the game. He's jumped right in here. He's here 3-4 days a week, comes up, walking the hallways, recruiting, lifting, and just out there doing all the things that coaches do to try to get their program instilled in the community.
Is he going to stick with the wing tee?
That's the story.
Okay, good. That's what he's good for.
Yes, he is absolutely a wing tee expert. I mean,
he is
the things that he's done with teams. The beauty of the wing tee is you don't have to be big, giant mauler type people. You can utilize speed and quickness and some misdirection to create some running lanes and it is the epitome of 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yep. Now,
go ahead.
if you don't mind, of all the coaches that were interviewed for this and looked at, why him?
I would say just his presence. When you talk to him, his energy, his ability to communicate his plan, his vision. He's just easy to believe in. You know, when he starts talking, you can feel that it's genuine, that it's authentic, and that his experience shines through.
Okay. Here's the question. You talked about he's here and he's talking to kids and recruiting. Do we have kids walking the hallways who didn't play last year, who should be playing, and are enough of an athlete to really add to the program right now?
You know, I think in today's day and age where kids specialize, I think there's kids like that in every building. You have to minimize the number of kids you don't get. So the answer to that, the long answer is what I just said. The short answer is absolutely.
Okay.
And he's finding them. I mean, I've mentioned a few of the kids that I see that he's talking to that have shown up to some of his weight trainings and workout sessions were kids that should be out, that should be playing, that he's identified very quickly. One of the things that was really pleasing to see, because he had been coaching in the conference, he had an idea of some of the kids that were already playing, but also was able to scour some of our other rosters and find names on those rosters that weren't playing that he already knew that he needed to talk to. So he's out there getting them. I would suspect we'll have quite a few more kids playing football this year than we did last.
Now, is he going to have a plan where he can? Is this going to be not just start at the freshman, sophomore, but is he going to have a plan for the 7th, 8th, 9th grade on up?
So far he's focused on the high school and incoming freshmen. So he's been at the middle school. He's spoken with current 8th graders. He'll be going back here in the next few weeks to get with the current 6th and 7th graders, start building that middle school plan. His design is to go down to Pee Wee, get with that group, start instilling some of his philosophies down there so that when they get to the middle school level, they're not having to learn his system. Then those middle schoolers can build on the things they learned in Pee Wee, and then when they go from middle school to high school, then the verbiage and the philosophy are all
That's
the
good.
same, and there's some continuity there.
Yeah. That's the question I was going to ask. How much say does the high school and the athletic department have over our youth programs, Pee Wee football, basketball, and so forth? Because I just feel it's so important, like what you just stated. These kids know the verbiage, they have an idea of the techniques, so that by the time they hit junior high and then into high school, it's something they've known about.
So technically, we don't really have any say.
No.
They're their own entities. Now, with that, we try to build relationships with all of our youth programs. You know, DCSA, the youth soccer program, plays on our facility. They use the middle school grounds to practice, which helps us. You know, our boys soccer coach Brad Feldner is on their board. You know, there's an existing relationship there. Our Pee Wee group, our Pee Wee football group, they're currently playing and practicing on our facility, and that board has been very good about communicating and wanting to use our facility, and has generally been open to some collaboration between our high school teams and our youth teams so that we can build those programs. And then basketball, I mean, they have to have gyms. The youth groups have to have gyms. They use our school facilities, and really the closest relationships we have is within our basketball program, as our high school coaches generally help run the youth programs. So really, I agree 100%, Alex, that there has to be some developmental relationships made early on so that we can teach fundamentals and some basic, you know, principles of play that our teams want when they get to high school, so that there is that growth from, say, 3rd or 4th grade on up into high school.
Yeah. Dylan, what were you going to ask?
Well, back to Coach Chanel. He mentioned Vince Lombardi, Woody Hayes, as far as coaching styles. I know I've talked to him. He does believe in discipline. Discipline, sometimes people take as a bad word. Discipline to me is a good word. We're all played back in the era where there was a lot of discipline in sports. He did say he will be disciplined. Again, that's not a bad word. If we can do you think we can get the parents, especially, and sometimes the kids, I think the kids want discipline. How do you see that working here at Greenville?
Well, I agree that kids want discipline. I also believe that parents want discipline for their kids. Where I think we have to be able to set the tone, if you will, is with communication. What are the expected behaviors? These are the expected outcomes. You know, these are the things that we want from you as a player and you as a parent. And once those expectations are shared and communicated, and as long as they're met with action that reflects those things, there generally isn't a problem. To simply say you want discipline or you're going to be disciplined, that's one thing. But to lay out, you know, the process and expectations, that's how you can actually build in that discipline and belief in what you're doing. In Coach Chanel's case, he's meeting with players and families individually and in the afternoons or evenings and sharing those things. It's a multi-purpose meeting. One, you know, we get to know one another, but two, he gets to share his philosophy and beliefs and what he expects. And some of that has to do with hard work and the willingness to do what you're told. And you know, if you communicate well and your actions show and align with what you communicated, people are generally going to be okay with it.
Seems like the last couple of years, Greenville's had quite a lot of turnover. And as athletic director, that has got to be one of your toughest jobs, is trying to find the right fit. What do you look for?
So that is absolutely the case. One of the hardest things that I have to do in my job is when there's turnover in the coaching world, is to find that right person. There is not a single formula that lands the right people. You know, sometimes they fall in your lap and it's easy. Sometimes it's not. The hardest thing really is getting people to apply. That's one of the challenges I try to remind people. We can only hire what applies. I can't just go pick a coach.
Why do you think that is?
The demands of the job. It is a high school coaching in general at all levels is a thankless profession. You know, you're nowhere do you get paid. You know, in the high school world, do you get paid well for what you're doing? You know, it's a job of love and passion for a sport. You know, in today's era, it's a win now mentality. You know, you turn on the TV and you hear stories about teams that win conference championships at the collegiate level, and then in the next day they're talking about their entire starting rosters in the transfer portal and going someplace else. The pressures and some of the abuse. I don't like that word that you take, verbal abuse that you take from coaches or fans or in the internet world. I mean, it's just brutal.
Their families in the stands.
Yes, I mean
the coaches' families.
Right, and it can be tough. So what we look for when we do get into the interview process and have, you know, applications and resumes in hand is you know, clearly we look for experience. There is no substitute for it, although every coach that has experience was an experienced coach at one point, so somebody had to take a chance on them. So that's not the end all, but we want people who can communicate a vision, that has a vision, that aligns with the principles of our community and of our school, that plans to be invested in our community, that is a student first coach. I don't need coaches that are about, you know, their personal records and wins and losses. Right. I need coaches that are about growing our young people into better athletes and better students, which ultimately turn into to great citizens and community members. We have a great coaching staff. You know, the coaches who have left, you know, they're not people that we were, that we were looking to replace. You know, with our girls soccer, for example. I mean, that was a transition. We were in a transition period when we went from Coach Ernst to Coach Tabler taking it over. You know, there was kind of a succession plan there to try to help that group through some of those tough times. You know, obviously Coach Kearns moving away from girls basketball, that's a family thing. She's got middle school age kids, and she's got a daughter that's coming up into school sports, and she just doesn't want to miss those things. I mean, there are other things as well, but those are the things that make it tough. So it's not that we've lost people that we were like, oh, great, good, they're gone. That's what kind of can make it tough. But those are some of the things we're looking for. Good people that are about our kids, that can communicate, that have a vision, can communicate it and help our kids grow.
One of your other tough jobs, I really know, is finding officials. Is it getting any better at all, or do you still see for the next several years it's going to be difficult?
So that's really a multi-layered question. So in the officials world, we've generally been okay. Where it gets really challenging is in the spring, where you get a lot of reschedules and things. Just as an example, last night I was on the phone with our baseball assigner at about 9 o'clock trying to get officials for moving a game forward a day to avoid weather later in the week, and he had to pull some strings and get some things done. But we definitely need more officials. It would make it a lot easier. Anything sub-varsity in the spring other than track. So if you're baseball, softball, you're probably only going to see a single official, which makes it difficult. And even the games like varsity games, when there are two officials, there are times when the calls are so close that you're never going to be perfect. And I always try to remind people that those calls, they make themselves up later. At some point, it's going to come back to you. You're going to get one. But it has gotten better. One of the challenges we are facing, one of the ways that the officials organizations feel that we can help is with their pay. All those umpires are paid officials, and they all always want a little bit more. And we've got to find a healthy balance between what we can pay them and what their needs are. But I think some of those conversations go hand in hand. If we're able to compensate them not a ton better, but a little better, it makes it easier for those guys to take jobs. But it's getting better.
One of the big things is the expense. And most of your sports, maybe football, basketball, are the only ones that generate income. The WOAC has now, I've been covering some games in the WOAC, they now have a gate fee to get into baseball and softball, which personally I feel there's nothing wrong with that. Do you see that coming to our conference?
Well, it can't until our bylaws get adjusted. So we could amend our bylaws. Generally our bylaw reviews are every 4 years, which is we're in the second year of a 4-year cycle. It has been a topic of conversation, mostly because in the spring, your only revenue generating sport is track. And that requires you to have a willingness to run track meets, which are not easy to do. They're big events. In organizing, getting volunteers and your officials, and they're expensive to run as well. A baseball and softball game, we'll run three baseball and softball games today in Greenville, 2 softball games and a baseball game, and it'll cost us almost $500 to run those games with no income. So that's the rationale behind it. I'm not a huge fan of it, but if that's where our conference goes, that's where our conference goes. And mostly, it's not that I don't want to generate some revenue. Who are you? My question becomes, who are you charging when they come to your game? You're charging mom and dad.
Yeah.
You don't get there. There's not a lot. There are some public people, just general community members who come to baseball and softball games, especially with our softball program, as being as successful as they've been. So you're charging moms and dads, and really what you're trying to do is make money off of your opponent. What you may do on the flip side of all that is if you start charging for spring sports, baseball and softball, you may sell an extra family pass or two, so that they can get into those games with their pass. But it'll be interesting to see what it does to attendance at those games and how much money they're actually generating.
Yeah. We're going to be getting near the end of our session here. Let me ask you a question. Open enrollment and transfers and so forth. I've been approached by quite a few people out the golf course and every place else. They want to know exactly what are the rules on that, because I know it's no secret that our boys basketball program was hurt quite a bit here. What are the rules for somebody that lives in, say, a Greenville district and then open enrolls someplace else? I know they have to sit out the second half of the season and tournaments, correct?
Correct. So if you are a Greenville resident and in high school that has established eligibility as a Greenville high school student, and you remain a resident of Greenville but move to a county school through open enrollment, because you have established eligibility, you will be subject to the transfer consequence, which is a 1-year, one-time deal where, let's say you played football as a freshman and you transferred, let's say, to Ansonia. You would have to sit starting week 6 of your sophomore year and sit out week 6 through 10 in any subsequent playoff games.
Okay.
Once you paid that penalty as a junior, then you can start playing your full schedule. If you physically move from Greenville's district to in that same scenario, let's just use Ansonia as an example. To Ansonia, you move into their district. That is considered a bona fide change of residency. There's a form that they have to fill out that indicates that they've moved, and you have to provide some documentation that there is a physical move, and then you are free to play immediately.
The entire season.
Yes, and that is the very basic conversation about transfer and moving. The transfer and residency rules are. It's one of the larger sections in the OHSAA bylaws and regulations, and there's a million different ways around. There are exceptions. There are homeschool and community school and private school rules that play into all of that, and and the Ohio Revised Code dictates some of the things that you can do in that world. So it is a complex web of who can play when and where and what the penalties are.
If a student athlete remains in their home district and open enrolls in another district, like the first situation we described, does, say, Greenville or Shaffer, do we have to sign a release then?
No.
There's no release that needs to be signed anymore. It used to be, didn't it?
So not for athletic.
Okay.
They would, for enrollment, yes. Like
okay, that's what I was
so
referring to.
that's the enrollment offices. There is a protocol in place for when students withdraw from your school and how you share documents and student files and all that. But that's a district level thing, not an athletic thing.
Okay. I know that's been kind of a bone of contention for years, and you see some of these schools, football-wise, or especially in basketball, my gosh, you're bringing kids in. It's like an AAU all-star team. Russia ran into that 2 years in a row with Richmond Heights up there that just brings them in from all over, and I know that's a question a lot of people just want to get cleared up, so thanks for doing that.
Yeah, it's every year OHSAA and the member schools have to address something in the transfer regulations through bylaw changes.
One more question. You can answer this if you want. How much money do you have laid back for NIL?
So it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, because a few years ago that was a hot button issue at the OHSAA state level.
Yes, sir.
We will be revisiting that at some point. Law, federal law, states has kind of indicated that is a legal way for kids to make an income, to earn some money for themselves. It becomes, how do you manage it, and what does NIL look like? How do you regulate it? How do you keep it from becoming? Let's use a big school in the Dayton area. Let's say Centerville has 2,400 kids in their high school. It becomes a place where businesses and local organizations want to pour money into the kids to get them. How do we keep kids from going there simply to make money?
Right.
Yeah.
Back to our transfer.
Back to the transfer.
So.
Yeah. Hey, Galen, you have one last question? Because I've got one more too. So.
No, other than I just wish people in the community could be around sports as much as I am, all of the sports, and see what Coach Shaffer does as far as being out in the weather, putting up banners. He's just working all the time, and people really should give the guy a thanks for all he does, the pressure he's under to make sure the buses are scheduled, make sure the officials are paid, and even to the point of a fan being thrown out of a ball game, he has to be there and may have to go up to his best friend and say, hey, you got to leave. So there's just a lot of things that people don't see what he does behind the scenes.
When I first met Aaron, he had all black hair too.
That's not quite, but it was much darker than it is now, Mike, for sure.
Hey, let me ask you one last thing, then we'll wrap things up here. What's the general feedback or your thoughts on the expansion of the divisions in the different sports this year. Basketball from 4 to 7, and 3 to 4, 3 to 5, something like that. What's your initial thoughts?
I haven't really heard a lot. We have an OHSA meeting here in a few weeks that'll kind of share through the winter, which is really where the big changes have occurred. We'd already had 7 divisions of football
Right.
for a while. The volleyball thing changed a little, but wasn't a huge deal. I think the winter with basketball changing, there'll be a lot of opinions there. I personally, from my perspective, some of the things I've heard is it's been a good thing. How the division of, how they divided up the divisions, I think there's some contention there. How do you justify the big Division 1s and the Division 2s getting approximately 72 teams in each division, where the other ones, to win a state championship, you've got to beat 130 some other schools.
Yeah.
But I think the disparity in the disparity in the size of the school and the rationale for why they did it, I think the smaller schools are okay with that. I can remember days when Greenville would play in the tournament, and they would play a school that had 2 or 3 times the size of our school, which we fight that battle in our daily lives as members of the MVL. As a small school, or one of the smaller schools in the MVL, it was even harder when you got to the state level. But to answer your question, I think we need some more time to figure out how that plays out.
Yeah, it was interesting just seeing it unfold this year. And one example, I know over in the Columbus area, they do things a little differently, but one school had a 6-16 record in the regular season, somehow drew a bye and played for a district championship, and they played the team that eventually won the state and got beat by 40 points, and they got a trophy for being district runner-ups, getting beat by 40 points in the only game they played in the tournament. So a lot of little things like that will happen. Well, hey, thanks a lot. This is Aaron Shaffer. I know, man, you got your plate full and busy schedule, and thanks for taking the time to talk to some old guys here that, think we know what we're talking about. But anyhow, Aaron Shaffer, Greenville High School Athletic Director. I'm Alex Warner, Mike Stiegel, Galen Blosser. Thanks for joining us here on another episode of the Roundtable here at My County Link.